welcome to the Empowered Mothers Network podcast, supporting mothers to be the best version of themselves. Today is episode 13 and I'm talking about finding your voice, which is very apt because mine's gone really husky today and I feel like I'm going to lose it. So now when I'm recording this, I'm hoping by the time this actually goes out onto YouTube, the weather's going to be better and there might be some sunshine. Because at the time of recording this, it's just grim. I think summer's just got forgotten. And yeah, if the lighting changes in this video, because I think I could do with a bit more lighting, but I've got it off at the moment. But yeah, if the lighting changes in the video, I've turned the light on for some extra lighting. So finding your voice, that's what I'm talking about today. The reason why, again, I think I've referred back to this. Talked about finding your voice and talked about the sort of why these things are coming up now in previous podcast episodes. But I think there is this push for us to find our voices now. So in this podcast, I'm kind of talking about it through the viewpoint of a mother, but equally I'd hope it applies to other people in other groups as well. So maybe even on a subconscious level, recently, a lot of us have been called more to really speak up about things, I think, again, because of, I keep going back to it, but it's true, but it keeps what's happening in the world at the moment. And the level of crap that there is on a global level, and then that filters down into the personal level. So we just have this push now because we see so much stuff that's not fair and not right happening around us, that we maybe have feeling that internal push to kind of speak up more about things, to stand up for ourselves, to stand up for other people who maybe aren't able to stand up for themselves, like our children, and it all kind of ties together. So from my own point of view, recently I've felt called to start this podcast up again, which wasn't something I particularly really thought was the best thing for me to do, because I don't consider myself very good at getting my point across, and I'm still in a process of finding my own voice. Well, not finding it, but expressing it, being able to express it clearly, I think. I figured that there was maybe more of an underlying reason that I'm not necessarily consciously aware of yet to why I have to blather on for half an hour every week on a podcast episode. But, if I can do this and encourage other people to kind of find their own voice, not necessarily to start a podcast or pop videos on YouTube, but of some way of expressing your own voice and getting it out there and speaking, then I guess it's worth it. I think as mothers, we can get naturally very defensive over our children, which is a good thing, most of the time. If you piss a mother off, you're going to know about it most of the time, because that mama bear mentality kicks in and kind of overrides everything else, everything that we've been conditioned to think. Sometimes you get in situations where mama bear comes out and anyone else can just run and hide. I don't think we need to harness that a lot. We don't have to kind of be at that level of all the time, but it does kick in and it overrides something sometimes. If you ever had that situation where either someone's said or done something to your child and that maternal instinct kicks in and you speak up and you might roar, but you might just put your point across forcefully, but that might kind of throw you and think, wow, that's not who I am usually. I don't usually speak like that. So that can be an interesting indicator of kind of what's bubbling underneath the surface of conditioning there. I think as the world changes so much, it's important for us to speak up, especially for, the next generation. If we need to speak up for those who come after us, and maybe even in some cases who came before us. So I think many of us have probably thought about, speaking up and finding our voice before, especially if it's an area of life where we feel quite restricted. So there's often a certain amount of resistance, and that's why we don't speak up naturally. So the resistance that a lot of us have is mainly, I think, what people will think of us in some way. So, as soon as we speak out, if we maybe speak our own truth or say things how we see them, then we have this like resistance to doing that because we're worried about what other people will say. You know, does what we're saying fit with other people's viewpoints who are around us? And, you know, if it doesn't, therefore we run the risk of not fitting in anymore. And I will say that quote again that I said in the last podcast about the opposite of belonging is fitting in. So yeah, there's that element of sort of feeling pushed out by maybe our social group or people around us. And a lot of the time we're just conditioned to sort of stay small and not be too gobby, especially as like women. When we were younger, you know, it was that good girl archetype, you know, so you can't speak out and get angry so much. We were kind of chastised in a way for it. And I don't think that's like a reflection on individual parenting that we've had, but I think it's more the cultural norms at the time. And you know, as you go back in history, obviously there was more of a thing of children being seen and not heard, and girls in particular often historically were told to kind of, you know, keep quiet, and, you know, it was more about the appearance of seeming sweet and all the traits that were associated with being a little girl. And you know, saying how you really see them and how you really think wasn't necessarily something that went down well. And I don't think it still is to a degree, but I see it changing. I know from my own experience, like, that obviously I was raised like in the 80s and 90s, and that was a time when that was still a thing. I hope you can still hear me over the rain. But yeah, nowadays my daughters are like, they're not afraid to say it how it is. They don't give a if they don't like something, they will tell somebody about it. And then there's that kind of resistance in me thinking, oh, they're not being polite and they're not seeming grateful, and that's something that was very conditioned into you as a child when you're the age of a mother now. So it can be difficult to find that like balance now between not wanting your children, especially as daughters, to get into that, be shoehorned into that like good girl archetype, you know. Don't say what you think, don't speak up, you know. Keep your thoughts to yourself. You're being too loud, you're being too much, kind of thing. Balancing that with, you know, not just going up there and being downright rude to people, because there is a line. Often resistance that we have comes from old stories that we've told ourselves about ourselves. And again, this looks at the kind of difference between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind, and the subconscious mind being the one that's holding all the thoughts and beliefs that you've accumulated from others and about yourself over the years. And often when we have trouble speaking up, because you'll notice, you know, not everybody does have trouble speaking up. Some people can just say what the hell they think and they're cool with it. Some of us have had this like conditioning and these beliefs and old stories that are in our head. So you might have been that, you know, for me, I think my story was that I was like shy and quiet and introverted, and you can absolutely be an introvert and still be able to speak up. You know, the two aren't completely polar opposites. You can even have a career in public speaking if you want to still be an introvert. There are many public speakers who are actually introverts, so it's not one or the other. But yeah, for me there was like the being shy and quiet thing, and I think, yeah, as a child I was quiet, and then you get things like, you know, parents and school teachers and people, if you don't, you know, you meet people and you don't want to say a lot to them, so they're, oh, you're shy, and then it sort of perpetuates, and then it gets filtered down into the subconscious, and then that becomes a story you hold about yourself, is, oh, I'm a shy person. And then you take that into adulthood, and that might not necessarily be true, or you might have been shy as a child, but that doesn't mean you have to be in as an adult. So all these old stories that we're having that we're holding in our head can sometimes hold us back from finding our voice and speaking up. So if you're not used to speaking up, it can be very difficult to start doing so. It's not obviously as easy just as a case of one day saying, okay, I'm going to speak up more in situations where I need to speak up. If it was that easy, we wouldn't all be Googling things and watching videos and being on this path. But it's not an easy path. But I think if we're wanting to step into this highest, best version of ourselves, as we all are, because that's why we're here, that we really do need to kind of connect with our voice and have authority over it as well. Have authority over sort of how and when to use it, and how to find that balance between, which I sort of illustrated before with my daughter's example, how to find that balance between knowing when to speak up or saying something, or when it becomes too much. So if we're maybe using our voice too much and it's not necessary at that point, which you might term as something like mouthing off. So how do we go about finding our voice? You know, where is it? It's not hiding somewhere. We go and find it and then there you go, we got it. Great. I think we need to take baby steps to finding our voice, because it can be such a large jump to go from where you are at the beginning when you don't feel you can speak up, to being fully able to express yourself at any time. You know, but most of us are probably somewhere on that journey, having set off from not being able to say anything about anything, but maybe not quite at that I can, you know, any situation. There may be certain situations in your life where you just, you know, you want to speak up more, but it's a struggle, and they often involve other people, certain relationships where it can be difficult to speak up, or potentially it could be dangerous to speak up. So finding baby steps is probably the best way to start about it. We don't have to go straight into standing up there on stage doing public speaking, because that's probably not for most of us. Things like meditation, mantras. So you can do a lot of meditations where you'll repeat a mantra or a sound. That can help. Any kind of work around the throat chakra, because that's like your centre of speech, communication, your voice. And then more practical things like setting boundaries with other people. So that might be something where you need to set a verbal boundary with somebody, rather than perhaps in the past, like maybe assuming that you had a boundary and assuming that maybe they knew about it, or that they would not cross that boundary. Sometimes it is having the courage to speak up and say, okay, that's not okay, I'm not okay with that, you've gone too far, or you've crossed the line, or something verbally to them. Also, and I found this one personally, is trying to speak up when it's easier to use another form of communication. So writing, look, my voice is going now, it's just, if I talk for a certain amount of time, it gets really hoarse, because I don't talk for like long periods usually. So mine's still in a process of being able to physically, I think, keep up with where I'm going in terms of speaking more. So yeah, when you've got another form of communication that's a bit easier, so it might be that writing comes really naturally to you, but speaking doesn't. So our world now makes things more convenient, more easy, and it's easier to avoid things that cause us discomfort in a way, not necessarily physical discomfort, but like, you know, make us feel it's difficult, it's hard, I don't want to do that. It's that kind of resistant discomfort that you feel about something that you don't either think you're very good at or you're not really wanting to do. Because the world's easier, it's easier to then get your point across through writing now. So, you know, you can shoot off an email to somebody instead of talk to them face to face or do a phone call. You can pretty much write anything you want in comments on their social media. You know, if you want to snipe and judge somebody on social media, it's easy to just shoot off your opinion in one or two sentences and then off it goes. And you don't have to go up to that person and say, hey, I think you're a douche, or I think this is a stupid idea, or why would you do that? What a bad mother you are. Now, on the journey of finding your voice, when we first have to speak up, and there is inevitably always a situation where you kind of get pushed into it, even if you like the idea, and you might try that, but it's probably going to bring up some things that aren't comfortable, and then you have to actually walk your talk and start speaking up, and it is hard. It is hard and it is difficult, and sometimes when we first start, you can find that actually the voice can physically shake or wobble. So that might be through the fear of speaking up, which is having a hold on you and you're trying to push through that. Or sometimes it can be anger related. So I found sometimes when I've spoken up, if I'm particularly, something's made me that angry that I need to speak about it, when in other situations I maybe would keep quiet, then that force of that anger can also come through and make your voice physically shake. So often when we start on this journey and you do get the like wibbly voice thing, it can bring up like feelings of kind of shame, and you might feel like weak in some way. But I think that's when we have to remember things like, if you've ever done like yoga or some form of exercise, like strength training, weights, whatever, you'll find the same thing happens physically with other muscles of the body. So like if you do yoga, for example, and you do a certain pose that your body's not used to, so maybe you do like a plank pose and you've never done planks before,